Welcome to the Introverted Doctor Podcast, the podcast that uncovers myths, mistakes, and misconceptions that holds healthcare professionals back from living their best life at work, home, and play. I'm Dr. Lalit Chawla, and with each episode, I'll be focusing on different aspects of a healthcare professional's life, such as communication techniques, mindset, routines, tools, and strategies, with the goal to show how to eliminate anxiety, trip-ups, and unwelcome results that comes from ineffective communications. Welcome back to a new year. I want to start off this podcast by dedicating this episode to my father-in-law, Raj Kumar Brar, who just passed away on January 3rd, and that's been a real hard loss for our family. He really embodied what it meant to be a great father-in-law and grandfather. He really was present when he was playing with the kids and whenever he was with people. And we got along exceptionally well, and he was always a big supporter of this podcast and anything that I did. And he was always a big advocate of self-improvement and enjoying life. So Dad, I salute you. I know this podcast will especially ring true for you as you embody the key message in this podcast. So it's really quite timely. So without further ado, I'm going to get into this. The key question I've had people ask me after I ended the last episode from 2019 was, how do you balance the equation of accomplishing tasks and goal setting and avoid the feeling of always chasing something in the future, yet also be present with people and enjoying the momentary things that are happening in our daily lives? In other words, how do we balance our to-do list, in other words, exterior goals, versus our interior goals of being calm, fully present with people in our lives and the work, whether it's at work and or play or whatever we're engaging in? How do we be present? And that's what this podcast is all about. How do we manage the tension of being versus doing? And how do we get things done in the right way? So, I've never really liked New Year's resolutions because for the most part, they never stick or last long enough. The reason I'm not fond of them is that most of them are not grounded in solid principles or reasons. They generally are set up with weak hope and a wish of being better without a solid foundation of why do you really, really want to make change or a new part of your life better. Because the reasons vary from one person to another. Someone may want to lose weight to look better. Another might want to be able to play with their kids more. Another to feel healthier. And generally, there's not much thought given to New Year's resolutions to live a better life, a life with greater health and harmony. So these types of resolutions are like a thin layer of ice that looks solid on top, but not thick and strong enough to give us support with any substance. Or, they're like a wooden fence with not very big, deep supports to hold it up, or a tree with very weak roots. So I want to, share with you an important quote to help lead into this podcast topic. And that quote is by Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher. And it goes like this: if you are depressed, you're living in the past. If you are anxious, you're living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present. So it's worth thinking about this message because, we can get depressed when we relive or think about past events or missed opportunities. And we can get anxious when we want to do things in a day-to-day to-do list and want an outcome to occur in the future. But when you're focused and you're fully present on your current actions or tasks or the interactions you're having, you're living in that moment and you're in that zone and you're in a very peaceful, content state. So how does that apply to a new year and decade? Well, the challenge for me and many people that I talk to is when I or we are being present, with our spouse or listening to my patients or clients or coworkers, being distracted by one thing or another, that's very easy. And being distracted by one thing or another, and that other thing is usually related to a task-oriented outcome. So, for example, getting, completing some forms, or picking up some mail, getting things ready for work, making sure I go to the gym, the small day-to-day things. Sometimes it's even being distracted by looking at our phones or something else even. That's really the challenge. And now a new year comes along and we start thinking about goals again, when really we should be doing this all along, and that's so important. But that really is something we should be doing all along, but that's an aside. So how do we manage doing goals? In other words, creating some tangible results that are important and necessary to sustaining and living our lives and thriving, versus being goals. In other words, being present in the moment with the people in our lives and even with ourselves, and not being distracted by things like text, social media, unnecessary things. How do we do effective goal setting, and what or could that look like? Is the traditional way the right way? How do we do effective goal setting and not get task setting, where we simply cross them off our items on our to-do list and have them replaced with more things on our to-do list? I don't know about you, but I find me and many of my colleagues struggle with finding time to be fully present with the people in our lives. We live in a culture where we're always looking to the future for results and then never really appreciating the present time we have. Not appreciating the present people in our lives and the things that we're doing. It seems more than ever people are becoming more anxious and stressed economically, socially, and politically. And the truth is, we do have to accomplish tasks and things, and we have a certain physical and financial responsibility and goals, but a constant accomplishments of unfulfilling tasks can really lead to a life of endless tasks on our to-do list without any purpose and attention. We may be accomplishing things and even doing them well, but they may not be the important things. One of the biggest myths today is that requiring a lot of time to do something doesn't make it important, and doing many things doesn't make it important. And here's the biggest one too. Doing something well doesn't make it important either. So trying to manage our exterior goals versus our interior goals is something we all know about. No matter what you did to get to where you're at, whether you're a doctor, nurse, physiotherapist, teacher, once you've achieved that exterior goal or destination, which required a lot of doing, getting down to business and getting the work done. But we know that it's really the being that really allows us to accomplish those doing goals, and importantly, to sustain the effort and results. Otherwise, we get burnt out. How many times have you woken up to do the things that you want or needed to do, but found it a struggle? The inner fire or desire was gone, and that's generally because we're so focused on the end result, and we haven't taken the time to take care of ourselves and our thinking, our mindset and body. But when you're focused on your inner being, when you're focused on things like being in your flow state, being in nature, focusing on prayer, creating systems of gratitude, gratefulness, kindness, you have a desire to achieve something purposeful. This especially applies when we were younger, when there was an internal ambition to achieve something, to create a better life. And when you create that internal energy of desire and passion, you just wake up with an overwhelming abundance to do things. Then all you really want to do is think of how can you contribute and do more. And that's part of what happens when you focus on your internal being. And that's what I'm advocating today. learning and creating systems to make your internal energy and passion alive and stay alive. The interesting thing to me is that, and the most important things in life are sometimes simply not quantifiable. They're just qualifiable. How do you measure the love you have for a family member? How do you measure the joy and excitement you feel about something that you're doing? How do you measure the laughter you have with friends? This is something very difficult. There's nothing to measure, and it's often overlooked. But when we focus on things like, nature, gratitude, positive people, enjoying being connected with the world, we find we become more patient, more at peace, and more importantly, we focus on increasing our awareness. And that's when we start really enjoying the magic of life and living. It's really the small things that elevates us and makes us better. So a good measure of knowing how well connected you are with your inner being or your inner state is by asking the question, how are you doing with others in your interactions that you had last year? How are you doing with yourself in terms of the interactions or the inner conversations you've had with yourself? Is there constant conflict in your life? The more challenging your interactions, the more conflict can often be a reflection of some of our own inner conflicts. Helping or working on resolving the inner conflicts, that's part of doing the work of inner goals. I'm sure you know people, patients, family or friends, or even yourself at times, who end up physically and spiritually and emotionally exhausted and wonder, how did I get to this point? How does that even happen? One part of the equation is that they more than likely were unaware of what was draining their emotional, physical, mental, and financial bank account. They weren't building their reservoir. You and I know that if we don't find ways to make the little deposits in our health, financial, social bank accounts, we can find that in a year, 2, 3, or 5, that we're broke. So how are you building your bank account of inner energy, strength, and passion? So you head into the new year and decade so that you can wake up with a greater desire and resilience and bounce with energy and passion to fulfill your outer goals. Here are a few categories I want you to think about and ask. Are you maximizing your sleep? Sleeping 8 hours a day. Are you hydrating yourself? Are you eating good, nourishing foods? Are you breathing well through the day? Do you have a mindfulness practice or a spiritual practice? Do you have a gratitude practice? Do you have a kindness practice? Are you learning and reading and feeding your mind with positive learning? And are you working to have a growth mindset? All of the above helps create great life at work, home, and play. Work on the inner being and the exterior goals will be more directed and fulfilling. And I'm going to share with you on the next podcast a planner that I use to help me with that. And that planner really connects with the inner goals and starting with the inner place so you're fueled correctly and so that you can also do the exterior goals that you want so you can meet your end results. But I leave you with one question. And that question is, what 3 emotions do you want to feel more of, more consistently in your work life, play life, and personal life? So for example, I want to be more passionate, excited, and joyful in my work life. So think about the 3 positive emotions that you want to feel and how are you going to make that happen? I hope you enjoyed this podcast and I hope it served you in some way. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please share with a friend or colleague and subscribe to us via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. And if you go to the website, theintroverteddoctor.com, and sign in there, you'll get my weekly emails about the podcast episodes that are coming out. And just a note, I'm going to be changing the release dates. It's going to come out every Friday. Just thought I'd try something different, and it kind of makes it a little easier for the busy work week that I have. I'm Dr. Lalit Chawla, and I want to thank you so much for listening. Let's together make a greater and more effective community in 2020, and let's make this next decade better than your last one. And let's do that together. Here's wishing you greater health, greater harmony, greater prosperity, and joy in 2020 and beyond. I hope you have a super weekend.